My name is Katie McIntyre, and I'm your host for the Loving Cup Elevate Your Gratitude podcast, and I'm here live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And today is Tuesday, January 2nd, 2018. So happy New Year to you all. And Jim, I want to say a happy special New Year to you, and thank you for producing the show each week, so thank you for that. So before I introduce my guests, I wanted to start today with a poem by Woodrow Lucas, and it's called We Are Loved. Sometimes life isn't what we expect, and we ponder on the meaning of our birth, but then God shows us the faces of those who have prayed for us throughout the years, and God blesses us to hear their prayers, and we realize that we are loved beyond measure. And sometimes miracles like this don't happen, and we have to believe that we are loved without physical proof. We must simply trust we are loved by God and many others, and in that reckoning, we are empowered to love others, not out of obligation, but rather gratitude. So with that, I would like to welcome my guest today, Lorienne Beals and her dad, Stephen Beals. Welcome to the show.
Happy New Year to you and Jim.
Thank you. So I'd like to start off with having my guests introduce the other. So would you like to go first, Stephen?
I would be happy to. Lorienne was born in Seneca Falls and started dancing here at the age of about 3 with Ann and Doreen and the folks here in Seneca Falls, and then went on to dance with Sean McLeod up in Auburn. And she doesn't like me saying that she's been dancing with him for a quarter of a century, but that's the truth. What people don't know about her probably is that she was also a competitive gymnast in her younger years and competed on regional level and so on. She graduated from Minders with honors and went on to Wells College, where she graduated Phi Beta Kappa Summa Cum Laude, which is pretty decent. Then she, after college, she worked for FRC here, Financial Resources Center, which was it then part of Xylem or not? Anyway, it's
ITT.
It's complicated, but she went on to work in Basingstoke, England for a year. I left out that you had your junior year in Paris, and so she's become fluent in French and Italian, French and English, and since she's married to an Italian and living in Italy, she's now fluent in Italian as well. And she's become an international dancer. She's danced in England and France and Barbados and Tunisia and probably leaving something out. Oh, the United States, of all places. But I'm not really her biographer. My role is her dad, and so I'm proud to introduce my daughter, Lorienne.
Perfect. And Lorienne, would you introduce us to your dad?
So we have to take a leap back in time.
It's way back.
Not that far back. So my dad is Stephen Beals, and he grew up in Ohio, and he's the baby of his family, the youngest of 5. And right now we have actually his eldest sister visiting with us, so that's
much older. Sorry, Janet.
She's probably watching.
Just kidding, Janet.
So my grandfather was a Methodist minister, and in the Methodist church, every 2 years or thereabouts, they get shifted
More
to...
like 5, but... Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if I did the math right, I could figure that out, but... So anyway, he attended about 5 different schools between kindergarten and graduating from high school, and went on to study at Baldwin Wallace College in Ohio, where he met my mom, and he was then drafted and filed as a conscientious objector, which first was rejected and went through a couple of appeals before finally they recognized his filing, and they sent him to Guilford College in North Carolina. And so there he was working for the school's printing press and delivering mail, and invited my mom to join him. So they both attended Guilford College. And then they went on to Virginia, and my sister was actually born in Virginia, and he continued, let's say, in the printing press / journalism area, so worked for a newspaper there. And then in 1981, when I was born, they moved to this area and have stayed in Seneca Falls ever since. And he worked for a press company in Auburn. So he was in pre-press, preparing images and text and things like that to get them ready to be published in Auburn. And he started toward his last years of working there to develop his real passion. His first passion was for writing. So he started writing for magazines. They ultimately started requesting that he test out equipment and things and attend conferences and speak, and was part of writing a book. And somewhere in all of that, he also began lay preaching for the Presbyterian Church. And ultimately, when he, I say it like this, retired, because he started his studies, started working on a master's degree, actually, before retiring. And then when he retired, he was able to dedicate more time to those studies and got his master's in divinity at 59 years old, which I think has been a pretty cool example for all the people that know him, that, you know, it's not too late to keep learning and to keep seeking out your dreams. And now he combines his interests, and he runs an online newspaper, the Seneca Daily News, that covers all kinds of news and events and businesses here in Seneca County. And for the last 10 years, he's officially been the pastor at West Fayette Presbyterian Church. And throughout all of his time here in Seneca Falls, he's been a really involved community member. So he's sat on boards and been the chair of boards and president of various organizations, from Seneca Community Players and now the Seneca Falls Performing Arts, the school board. He's been very involved in the House of Concern, Pathway Home, and also with Rotary. So that's my dad.
Stay busy.
Slightly busy. That's super. Thank you. Beautiful introductions. So let's jump in and talk about 2017, which just ended a few days ago. And is there a highlight or a few highlights from 2017 that you're most grateful for?
That it's over. Actually, we had a wonderful trip to Italy to see Lorienne and Alessandro, and we also took our grandchildren to their first trip to Disney World.
Oh, fun.
So that was great, and visiting them in Connecticut, and a good outcome for my surgery that I had this summer. So it was, all in all, a pretty good year.
How about for you, Lorienne?
So for me, I would say actually a highlight of this year was, apart from visits from family and also from friends in Italy, this fall I decided to focus on the topic of gratitude with my English students, and it was around the time of Thanksgiving. And of course, Thanksgiving is a holiday in the United States. It's not a holiday in other parts of the world. So I took it as an opportunity to really explore and share the tradition. And it was really neat for me to see how excited and connected my students became with this concept. And I shared things like Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving that talked about the message and gave some history as well about how the holiday began, which was a great moment of reflection for me, because sometimes we get so caught up in the preparation for a holiday and where are we going and what are we doing and who are you inviting and what are you cooking and the timing of the cooking and, you know, all of these things. And now with Pinterest, you think about how beautiful is the table, and, you know, you think about a whole gamut of other things.
Your hands up your candles yet?
Right. So it was really neat for me too to actually go back and in sharing it with my husband and in sharing it with my husband's family, and then ultimately with my students too. I really got to explore the topic a little bit more deeply, and that was a really beautiful thing. And at the same time, my husband went through a training program at work that was talking about essentially being a better leader and manager, and they shared this one particular thing, which was to start your day with 3 happy thoughts, to think about 3 things that were going to kind of guide you through the day that you in essence are grateful for about that day. And so he and I started putting that into practice. He shared that with me, and every day we would text each other our 3 things. And 2 months later, we continue to do that, and it's been a really great practice. So I know I sort of anticipated one of your questions, but it was really tied to my message of 2017 that sometimes in sharing a story or in sharing an idea or a concept with someone else, you actually learn a lot more about it yourself.
I love that. So how old are your students?
All ages.
Okay. And you're teaching them English?
Teaching English.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So can you get a turkey to roast in Italy?
You can.
Okay.
You have to order your turkey in advance because turkeys there are usually used for parts and not cooked as a whole turkey.
Okay.
So in order to get a turkey that will fit in the oven, which typically is smaller than the average oven here, you got to special order it.
Okay.
But yeah, it works.
That's fun. Good. So that's 2017, but we've all had many years before 2017. So if you think about your life as a whole, is there something that sticks out as something that you're most grateful for?
Besides family, I think that's the thing I'm most grateful for is the family. But there was one of the things I'm most grateful for is the opportunity to work with people who are facing loss and illness and other personal tragedies in the role as a minister. Doing that can certainly be physically and emotionally draining, but the return you get from that investment of yourself is so much greater than anything you expend. I think having the opportunity to help people through these crises through the healing process is probably the most important part of any ministry. So I've been very grateful for having that opportunity.
And lots of lucky people who have your help and support. That's beautiful. How about for you?
So I think his example shows that I've had role models in my life that have really taught about the extension of family. So my mom and my grandmother were featured on this podcast back in November. And I was talking with my grandmother yesterday afternoon, and she was telling me about the experience, and she said, I walked out at the end and I thought, oh my gosh, all I did was talk about family. There's so many more things that I could have talked about, and the sun and the rain, and there's so much in life to be grateful for. And listening to her say that just made me realize that I have a family who has always extended the idea of family. So and I sort of said to her, well, yeah, you talked about family, but that's because for you, family is not just about your blood relationships,
right.
But family extends far beyond that and extends into community. And to listen to her tell stories about different times in her life where there were people that she came across that had a need, and she immediately found ways to fill the need. And you might think of that as what a mother does for her child, but for her that was just automatic. And
I thought she was like MacGyver.
Yeah. Totally.
The MacGyver of Red Cross.
Yeah. Figuring
that's
out
a good comparison.
how to make it work, right? And so these have been my examples, and I try to live that as well. And I think that what's really beautiful about how my parents raised my sister and I with this idea of extension of family, and if friends came to our house, I'll call us mom and dad, mom Beals, dad Beals, and many of my friends to this day address them that way. And Grammy is Grammy. She's everybody's Grammy.
That's one of my favorite stories that she shared.
Yes, and but they also use that to open up the possibilities for us to have many mentors and to have many examples. And so I think my parents were very humble in a way in leading and guiding us to encourage us to follow other people too, to encourage us to go out and explore and to identify other kinds of leaders and role models around us, and to give us that kind of freedom that we didn't only have to listen to them, that there were lots of people that had important things to say and were living examples for us to follow.
Well, I thought we always told you had to listen to us.
There was some
She
fun.
never did.
No, it reminds me. I used to nanny for a family and took care of their three children. And there was one day where I was holding their little boy, and his mom went to take him from me, and he didn't want to go. He wanted to stay with me, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she's like, "It's okay. I want my kids to know that many people love them, and that it's not just their dad and their mom." And that's something. She died from breast cancer a few years later, but that has always stuck with me. Like, it's a beautiful example as a parent, and I try to do that with my own kids to make sure they know there's lots of amazing people that do love them and can teach them things and have different points of view than I do. It's really, really beautiful.
I have to say that growing up in Seneca Falls kind of gives you that anyway, because you have a definite sense of community here, and a lot of really good people in this area that do a lot to support the community and support individuals. That's certainly been my experience as a pastor. The folks in my church just reach out constantly to help with the community, help with the House of Concern. They're very active in the community, and that seems to be one of the great things about living here.
It's a really special place. I mean, I didn't grow up in Seneca Falls, and I really have gotten to know it over the past 3 years. But you're right, Stephen. It's people who they say yes first, or they just take a step forward to take an action and help. It's remarkable.
My husband has a great story from the first time he ever visited me here, and we were actually in Auburn, not in Seneca Falls, but I think this rule applies to this whole area. And he was walking from my house to go find some good pancakes, and I'd given him instructions for how to get to Hunter's Diner.
Okay.
So he was walking and feeling a bit unsure of himself, and so he saw a gentleman mowing his lawn, and kind of waved him down and said, "Do you think you could help me?" And this man took the time, stopped mowing, and said, "Okay, so you're going to go down here," and gave him really detailed instructions with points of reference so he'd know he was on the right path. And then waved him on, "Have a great day, enjoy your visit," About 30 seconds later, as my husband's walking down the road, he sees this car pull up next to him, and it's the same gentleman. He waves to him and says, "Hey, listen, I've got to run an errand anyway. Why don't I drop you off?"
Oh, that's great.
And, for Alessandro, that was like an amazing example of caring for a stranger, and making sure that another person got what they needed and felt comfortable. And he just found that so welcoming and not something that happens everywhere.
Yeah. So were they good pancakes?
And he approved.
Okay, good. That's good. So is there something that, if you think back in your life, that at the time you were not grateful for, but looking back, you're grateful for that now?
Well, the thing that pops up for me is, this was in 1985, I think. Seneca Community Players were going to do the Fantastics, and there are two roles that are non-singing. It's a musical, kind of a musical comedy, and there are two roles that are non-singing roles, and I auditioned for the old actor, which is a non-singing role, and I did that because the author of the play actually performed that role on Broadway when it first went on, and I thought, perfect role for a non-singer. So they cast me as Matt, which is the boy, one of the leads, and it's a rather complex, challenging singing role. And I'm going, what are you thinking? And what it taught me is that people can see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And how limiting our own self-image can be. And that has helped me in a lot of ways, very much so in the ministry. People saw me as able to do pastoral work, and I thought, can I really do that? And then people kept encouraging me and said, okay, maybe I can do that. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah. So that was a very, very helpful for the rest of my life, going through that process.
And you've performed in a few other singing roles since then, haven't you?
Well, mostly non-singing roles, but yeah.
That's great. And how about for you, Lorienne?
So for me, I would say by now it's pretty clear that my family is a very close-knit family, and we really genuinely like spending time together. And so it was really hard for me to accept moving so far away. It's hard for me to be so far from my family and my niece and my nephew. If I think about it in logical terms, and I think, oh my gosh, in 1 year I spend like 4 or 5 days actually physically present with them, I'm not so grateful for that. But it makes me even more grateful, for sure, when we do spend time together like we were able to over the holidays this year. But more so, I'm grateful that I've been able to share this experience of what it means to shift perspectives, to learn a new language, to make your way in a new community. I grew up in Seneca Falls, and I never moved the way my dad moved as a kid. So I felt very tied and attached to my roots, and couldn't really imagine myself going far away. And yet, as my dad mentioned, I lived in France. I spent a year in England. I've done a lot of traveling, and now it's been six years that I've been living in Italy. And what's awesome is that I've been able to share that. So my parents are still at a point where they're able to and want to travel and come and visit, and so I get to share the places and the people and the foods and all of these things with them. And my sister brought my niece for a week, and so I got to share that with her, and she got to meet some of my students, and I was becoming pen pals. And
awesome.
So there's some really exciting things that can happen because of the fact that I live so far away. And of course, connecting with my in-laws as well has been really special.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, there are now 9 time zones between my daughter and my sister, so that our family is very spread out now.
Yes, but she's one that has also come and visited me in Italy. Is just an example of how it's increased my appreciation for technology as well. Made me more grateful for things like Skype and FaceTime, and
so that you can see each other even though it's with a screen.
Yes,
but still
helps close that gap.
It's good. So we've talked about family, and I wanted to know if specifically for the two of you, if there's a favorite memory of time that you've spent together that you could share. Something fabulous and that you'll never forget.
Well, the trips to Italy have been incredible. Going to the arena in Verona and seeing
Placido
Domingo, yes. And I mean, it's just an incredible experience. So what Lorienne was saying earlier about her living so far away, providing new opportunities that we never would have had, is absolutely true.
And if you went to visit there and Lorienne wasn't living there and couldn't give you that like behind the scenes VIP tour.
She's a great travel director, I can tell you that.
But it's good. She's tried out the restaurants already in advance, absolutely. So it's like you're going to have a great meal.
You eat very well.
It's wonderful.
Thank goodness I dance. So when I think about my dad, I think about a couple of his qualities in particular that I carry with me, I think, every day. So more than like one special moment or story. As a kid, he always used to repeat a phrase to me that at the time drove me crazy, but now that I find myself saying, which is go with the flow. So I don't know if it was how he grew up and lots of siblings and lots of moving and, managing a lot of continuous change. But he always had this approach that was, nothing's a problem. You figure it out, that MacGyver approach. Yeah. And so that was something that he really reiterated a lot, because I was moreover, an anxious person by nature. So I tend to get stressed and feel a lot of anxiety. And so he really tried to drill that message into me. And at the same time, he always has a sense of humor about everything. And I don't think it's by chance that I found a husband who has a very similar sense of humor and puns and jokes and being silly, putting things on their head, on their ears, on their nose.
Keep it light.
And that's, I think, a really important element of my everyday. And so in that way, I feel like my dad is with me all the time.
Yeah, the picture that wound up in the book about Disney World was when I had Graydon's tennis shoes on my ears. Oh, well. You get a reputation, you know.
That's awesome. So, is there anything else that you would like to share today with our viewers? Any hellos to anyone watching?
Well, hello to the family. and my church members and Rotary. Yeah, anyway.
Well, I'll be sure to share this also with some of my students that I think might have fun seeing me and my dad and hearing us talk about what it means to be grateful. I shared with them in particular a TED Talk that I found. And I won't pronounce the guy's name because I will butcher it. He's a German monk that did a TED Talk called "Want to be Happy? Be Grateful." And
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, definitely worth watching, and it really talks about gratitude as a daily practice and how every moment is a gift, and that gratitude happens when a gift is freely given. So no strings attached, and when it's something that you genuinely appreciate, that's something that you wanted or that you actually needed. And so when you receive that gift of something that you really wanted or needed and it's freely given, you feel that really warm, swelling feeling of gratitude, and that gratitude is actually what brings happiness.
Mm-hmm. And then there's health benefits to it too. It's amazing. There's a whole study of, the medical and the benefits to your brain and your body when you celebrate and acknowledge gratitude. So, all good stuff.
I should say to my Italian family, buon anno nuovo, ciao bella. That's about all the Italian I know. And I'm sure it's totally wrong, but we're working on it.
I think A for effort, for sure.
Yeah, I should give two shout outs probably to two important mentors, one from the past that has carried forward and one that is from the more recent times, but I'll give a shout out to Sean McLeod, who's definitely been one of my important role models, and he and my dad have always had a great relationship.
He's a fabulous man.
And he's another that just does a ton for community and really believes in helping people find their path, and he certainly helped me do that. So. And then the other shout out that I should give is to Ariana Ross, who I work with at Story Tapestries, and I began working with her in 2010. And when I made the decision to move to Italy, she said, "But I don't want you to stop working for me. How do we make this work?" And so I've continued to work with Story Tapestries, which is an arts and education organization that goes in and does community building programs that help teach literacy and help teach math and science skills while using the arts to make sure that it's an inclusive learning process and that it's accessible for everyone. And that's a big part of my life right now too.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It also gave her mom and I the opportunity to do a couple of podcasts. What they call it, Facebook Live?
Their Facebook Live post Tuesdays with Story Tapestries.
And we talked about women's rights in Seneca Falls and It's a Wonderful Life. So
I saw both of those. They were great. Yeah, you talked about Catherine Switzer. You talked about the Boston Marathon. Yeah, you and Karen are a good team on screen. we split you up for this, but well, that brings us to the end of our time together. So thank you to Lorienne and to Stephen for being the guest today on The Loving Cup, Elevate Your Gratitude. And really to our viewers, I just want to say have a beautiful day, have a happy new year, share your gratitude, and we'll be back next week with 2 more guests. And until then, be well.